You're a first generation American. What does that mean to you?
Um, I mean, in my family because, my parents, um, made such a massive transition, really leaving a country that they loved so much. My siblings, the same, my two older brothers, my sister, my grandmother, who all came over here. I was the baby. I was the American, right? Um, So it's important for me to honor, the native, the heritage of the family, being from Cuba and ultimately tracing back the roots all the way to Spain. But I take a tremendous amount of pride and gratitude for this country for allowing my family, to come here to escape, a political oppression and communism, and to give them an opportunity, to flourish in this country. My parents were eternally grateful for the United States of America. And obviously, I have to be the same, I am the same, because without that happening, who knows what my future would have been if I would have even been, alive, given the circumstances and how my dad came over first from Cuba, many, many months before the rest of my family did, just to get started, establish, get a job. Because when they left, a lot of the, immigrants that left Cuba, they left with essentially the clothes on their back and what they could pack in a suitcase, and they had to start from scratch. So being, native to America for me is I'm extremely proud of this country. Extremely proud of my family and all the sacrifice that they've made.
What was Cuba like for your parents before they migrated to the United States?
I mean, really for them, it was, the way that they described it to me was very much like a paradise. They were well-to-do, family over there. My mom's family, had a lot of real estate, had a, very significant farm over in the country that was producing, income for the family. My father was working at a bank, and it was a beautiful life that they had. They had three children. They had, extensive family in the area. From what my dad describes, it was a pretty nice job, at the bank. Open it up at 9 o'clock, close it down at around 11 or so. Go home, have lunch, have a siesta, go back to the bank, open it up, and then thereafter go, to a club afterwards. With his friends, and then uh, and then of course the family was also, involved in the farm as well. So they had a very good life, and um, for them to all of a sudden, experience what probably it didn't probably wasn't overnight for them, but it probably seemed like overnight transition, of a new, dictator, communist dictator coming into the country and overthrowing, the current regime, and essentially, taking away private property, just threw them completely into turmoil. Castro, my dad was very, opposed to the communist regime, vocally, and as a result of that, Castro, did threaten him, threaten the family, so they had to deal with that, and they realized that at some point that, they were fearing for their safety. He was fearing for the safety of the family. And they had to make, very drastic changes, which was, of course, to escape that and come to this country.
For those threats, would people come to the house or describe, if you can, um, how they would react to people not agreeing with the government?
Yeah, I know. Even within families themselves, there were disagreements. Because there were some family members that were sympathetic to the Castro regime, and then others that were not. My uncle, who was an architect over in Cuba, he had heard, Castro speak, and he told, my parents that, he's a communist, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, so to speak, and to be very careful. And so I'm not privy to what the day-to-day experiences that they went through. I wasn't alive at the time, and but I do know that there were threats made against my father. There were threats made against the family, and those threats were directly to him. And so I think at that point is when they realized that, we've got a short time left here and that we've got to make big changes.
Make the leave.
Yeah.
Did they consider any other countries to escape to?
It was always the United States from the very beginning.
Always
Yeah.
America.
Yeah. Always America.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So a lot of people remember and think of a lot of migrants leaving by boat. But I did a lot of research and it's very, very interesting. A lot of Cuban migrants were able to leave by plane.
That's correct.
So your dad was able to leave by plane.
Yes.
The time that he did it, he just had a private transport. When he did it, he just said, "I'm buying a ticket and this is where I'm going."
I believe so. Again,
Yeah,
I
to your
I don't-
knowledge, right?
to my knowledge,
Yeah.
yeah. I know they did not come over on a boat. It was
Yeah,
all
by
through-
plane.
By plane.
And then he ultimately ended up in New Jersey.
He did.
What made him choose New Jersey?
There were other Cubans that had, left Cuba that, made their way to New Jersey. I think at that time, in the very early 60s, because he came over in 61, I think there was probably more job opportunities in New Jersey at that time. And so there were some friends of his that were in New Jersey. So, his objective was, need to find a job, need to start generating income for the family, to support the family. And so that's what took him to New Jersey. Yeah.
Gotcha. So he left before the Cuban Missile Crisis. Your entire family was able to
That's correct.
make it to the United States. So I learned about the Freedom Flights. I'm sure you're aware of them.
Yep. I've
So
heard.
I did a lot of research. The Freedom Flight airlift program for 8 years from 1965 till 1973, Monday through Friday, twice a day, Pan American World Airlines conducted freedom flights flying over 250,000 Cubans from Cuba to America. They departed from Veradero, Cuba to Miami. It's the largest airborne refugee operation in American history, and it was primarily funded by the American government. The Cuban government allowed people to leave. They didn't really provide much help in
Right.
doing so.
Exactly.
In 1965 to 1973, it cost the American government approximately $12 million. But you're in finance. In today's economy, that $12 million is over $87 million in today's dollars, which is pretty remarkable. And it was over 250,000 people. It was close to 300,000. And it's remarkable. Of course, that helped establish the Cuban community in Miami.
That's right.
But people also went to New Jersey and other places in the country as well. So I thought that was pretty incredible.
I mean, it's an incredible story. It really is of, a generation of Cubans that came over to the country, and they were escaping political oppression. I mean, I can't even fathom, how difficult that was for all of those families, for those individuals to go through that, to be uprooted from, your country that you love, to, have division in your family, to start from scratch, to go to a foreign country, you don't speak the language, and essentially leaving all of your wealth behind, most of your personal belongings, all of your assets. It's mind-boggling to me when I go back and I think of what my parents went through, what my dad was going through in his 40s, having a family of 3 kids, and coming over to this country and starting from scratch, and not speaking, any English. That's a staggering thought, for myself to put myself in that position. When I think back to what I was doing when I was 40, and to think of, having to leave the United States and go to a foreign country and learn the language and start from scratch. I can never thank them enough for the sacrifice that they made. They worked, a lot of jobs to really, start from scratch and do it all over again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of
And
gratitude.
theirs is a story that's told by thousands and thousands of other families. I mean, theirs is it's not unique, it's unique to us. But there's so many other Cubans that came over, a lot of other Cuban families that when they came over here, they had an impact. They became professionals, they became doctors, they became lawyers. They worked in finance, they worked in banking, it's all because of those sacrifices that those families made way back then.
And it's stories that deserve to be shared,
Absolutely, yeah.
because there's a lot of people from other countries experiencing the same or similar circumstances, right?
Sure,
And it's
yeah.
important to remember history. I was shocked. I don't remember learning about the freedom flights in school. We may have covered it, but I really just didn't remember it until I really did a deep dive of
Yeah, I
what
never
took place.
it was never anything that I learned in school either.
Yeah.
It was something I learned after leaving school,
And I hope,
and from talking with my dad and talking to my mom, and really learning from them. Tell me about your experience. How did this all happen? What was Cuba like? What was it like when you guys came over? And learning of all of the subsequent migration of Cubans over to this country, and then of course the more famous one was in the 80s, when they all came over, escaped on boats.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So on rafts. I mean,
Yeah.
to leave a country on a makeshift, wooden raft made of just
Car
basic
tires.
materials,
Yeah.
is kind of telling of what the situation was and how desperate they were to leave and to come to land of opportunity, which is what the United States is.
The oppression
Yeah,
that
the
they had to
oppression.
escape, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It really sounds like Cuba was a beautiful, vibrant, flourishing place before communism overran it,
I believe it was. I mean,
right?
architecturally, spectacular architecture. Um, my dad always used to talk about, Valladero was the most beautiful beach, that he'd ever seen in his life. And this is, he told me that later in life after had been to quite a few different beaches, around the world. But yeah, it was a beautiful country, and unfortunately, over time now, it's just a slow deterioration. My oldest daughter was fortunate enough to go over years ago, to go visit, as a tourist. And that was her experience as well. That her impression was that it was a beautiful country that's just, kind of dying a slow death. You can tell that just things are not being kept up. And the population in general, is very poor and really struggling. And the infrastructure is deteriorating.
Yeah. Financially, there's not money coming in.
Right.
Very hard to keep things going.
Because, yeah, partly, of course, the embargo and so forth. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Have you ever gone back or
I've
gone
not
to
gone
Cuba?
back. My second oldest brother, he has gone back, and my daughter went back, or not went back, but my daughter went.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know that I would want to go, quite honestly. If perhaps under a different, political situation, I probably would like to go. Um, but I have a certain vision of the country in my mind that was described to me by my father and by my mom, and I think I would rather keep,
Those
that
memories.
vision and those thoughts, as they are today, and not to have them tarnished by what the reality is of the situation in that country, as
Yeah.
it exists today.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
I think I may have told you before, my dad's dad immigrated from Europe in the 1950s after World War II. And the country that they're from, in my last name, the country's called Gache. Never heard of it.
Never heard of it.
No one has. I had college professors try to argue what my last name was. I'm like, no, you can look it up. Gottschee. Pronounced Gache.
Good chat.
So that OSCH is really common in it's its own language and everything. It's a dialect of German.
Okay.
But before NATO, the League of Nations, it was a mess between World War One and World War II that all these countries were just thrown together. And that's when Yugoslavia came to be. Yugoslavia is no longer around anymore,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
now it's been divided how many times now? So when all this took place, they were all just nationless refugees. Gache didn't exist. So it's different to say Cubans have to go here or they're going back to Cuba. But when Gache doesn't exist, there's no place to
There's
go
no
back
place
to.
to go to.
Because
That's right.
now Slovenia said you're not Slovenian, Austrian said you're not Austrian, and all these other neighboring new countries, they're like, you're not one of us. So they walked from modern day Slovenia to Austria. And I've shared this story once before in another episode. My grandfather was extremely young. His older brother died during the walk from Slovenia to Austria, and his mother refused to bury him on the side of the road.
Wow.
And he was pronounced deceased by doctors because you can imagine they probably started on horseback or mule or donkey, but all these things would be stolen or you'd have to sell it in order to have passage. So eventually they're just walking. So my great great grandparents carried their deceased child for God knows how long.
Wow,
And
that's powerful. That's
one day, it's this myth or legend. One day he wakes up in the bag and he went on to survive. And there's no explanation. And now this is over 70 or 80 years ago that there's no explanation what happened.
wow.
Whether, however, he was pronounced, but he was carried for a period of time.
That's quite a story.
So if
Yeah.
they buried him, he would have been buried on the side
He
of the
would have
road.
been very, oh, that's
So they ended up in Austria, and then they were in all these different refugee camps, and they were not treated like people. They weren't treated like a literal human. So they'd be sprayed with all these chemicals, DDT, asbestos, all this stuff. So decades later, they're dying of these very specific odd
right.
cancers, and difficult to prove now, but there's a lot of speculation what was killing these people. Decades later, you're getting sprayed as a child and it kills
Sure.
you before
Yeah.
the age of 80. You know, you live
Highly
this
likely.
this long healthy life and you get this random cancer and you
That's
die
right.
within a year of diagnosis. It's really difficult. So, my grandfather was one of the younger ones. Him and his sister had to be sent, I think it was to Switzerland because they were deemed too unhealthy to migrate. And he was force fed cream spinach and milk to like fatten him up. And later in life, he couldn't eat either one. He just refused. He was such a bad
Yeah,
experience.
that's right.
And it got to the point where his parents said, "Give me my children back. We're leaving." And they came to America by boat on the USS Sturgis, this big ship, and they went through Ellis Island, the whole nine. Um, so the further and further these generations get, the harder these stories are to convey.
It's very true.
You
I
know,
mean, I think, today they are, multiple generations disconnected from it. And, yeah, I've always been, of the thought that adversity, for people to experience adversity, it builds character. And this is a great country. We all want our kids and our grandkids and future generations to live a better life. And I think that's happening. But I also believe that it's also good for some of those generations to experience some adversity because it gives us an appreciation for all of these things that sometimes we take for granted, right? And I've used that philosophy with my kids, my two daughters. I've explained to them, that at times adversity, it's okay to have a tough time. It's okay to make mistakes, right? Those are opportunities to learn from them. And when you experience adversity, if you can rise above it, and flourish on the other side, it's just going to make you a stronger person. It's going to build stronger character. And so I think you're right. As future generations are experiencing less adversity in general, I mean, the life in the United States is, it's a very good life for most people. And so I think they are becoming a little bit more disconnected with these stories, and even with movies, we probably don't see as many movies. When I was younger, I used to see a lot of World War II movies. You don't see those as much anymore. Not that they glorify war. War is a terrible thing, but at least it gives people, an impression, of just how much adversity, World War II veterans, for example, experienced, which my daughter, who's in veterans, law, represents some of those folks, to hear their stories it's mind boggling.
it really
And,
is.
but I totally agree with you that as we get further disconnected from that, there's a little bit less of appreciation for. So I think it's important for people to continue to tell the stories. I think it's very helpful for future generations to at least give them a perspective.
My dad is in your shoes where he was a first generation American. And Adversity does not know color. Adversity does not know ethnicity.
That's right.
Adversity doesn't know political affiliation or anything else. Where once my kids eventually come around, they're not going to really comprehend what great great grandpa that they never got to meet, what it was like to walk. I mean, I looked at the math one time for the distance. I think it's like walking from like here to like Georgia or possibly further than that by foot. And
That's incredible.
it's
Yeah.
it's
That's
unbelievable.
yeah.
It's
Yes, it
hard to
is.
conceive. I will never have to do that ever in my entire life.
That's right.
But it's really important to honor and attempt to remember and be
Sure. Yeah.
sympathetic, like you noted before. And like you said, super sad. My grandfather never made it back. So, like I said, it's modern day Slovenia, but he never got to see what he left. He
Yeah.
has some memories,
It's sad. Yeah. It
um,
really is.
and it's almost more heartbreaking. He has more memories from the refugee camps because they wouldn't teach you your native language.
All right.
So in these camps, he spoke a chair. They taught him German. So then at home, he's speaking because his parents didn't speak German, and they're different dialects, but they're pretty different. And
Right.
now it's a
Yeah.
dying language. There's not many people left that can speak it.
Wow.
So at home, he's speaking Gacher. Everywhere else, he's speaking German. He gets to America now; he has to learn English, and they don't teach you these things very well, right?
No, they
So your
don't.
parents had to learn English.
They did.
When your family migrated to New Jersey, were they in a Spanish-speaking neighborhood?
They not specifically, but there were a lot of other Cubans that had, left Cuba. So there was a community in New Jersey. There were friends, and they were all helping each other, right? To either find jobs or find places to live. You know, just the basic things that everyone has to deal with in life. And so, when my dad came over, he stayed in a room that a family that had come over earlier, that they were a little bit more established. So he was just staying in a room, by himself, after leaving, his wife, his three kids, his mother-in-law, leaving his family, his parents, all behind Cuba. And here you are, you arrive to this country, and you're alone in a room essentially at night. And it reminds me, I think there's a scene in a movie called The Lost City, where there's kind of a similar scene where a Cuban, they came over to the United States, is it shows a scene of him, just alone in a room, and just how different life had become for him. So I'm sure my dad had the same kind of feelings, right? And so, but there were other Cubans there, so I don't know that it was specifically, let's say, a Cuban neighborhood, but there were certainly a lot of other, family, or friends that were there to help, others in the community to get established and start a new life.
Which helps because he could ask them, "Where do I go for this? How do I do things?" It's way
Right.
harder to convey. If you drop me in a Spanish-speaking country, I would struggle
Yeah.
to try to convey,
Sure.
"Where do I get groceries? Where's the hospital?" Things like that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure broken English or broken Spanish for me, I'd be able to try to mumble my way through it,
Hmm.
but it would definitely help if there's another native speaker,
Yeah. And I think
to
that's
help
why
you
we
out.
see in the United States that, other, immigrants that come to the country, they form clusters in whatever, different communities, exactly for that reason.
Yep, Little Havana,
Uh, Little Havana, right?
Chinatown,
So
Little Italy.
exactly, right. So, because it's helpful for them to, survive and to adapt and to, integrate with, with the United States and the local, economy, and local, social, environment,
Yeah.
for sure.
You just described the isolation he felt. Despite being with people that he may have known or he met from Cuba, he still felt extremely isolated being
Sure.
alone.
I mean, imagine you've left your family behind in, under a communist regime. So I'm sure in his mind, he had to have thoughts that there's no guarantee that they would come here. Um, you've got an irrational and extreme dictator that takes over your country. Um, while you might have gotten out, there's no guarantee that they're going to let anyone else out. So that had to be, scary for him, knowing that, but he had to do it because he had to come over first to get established and to then later, be able to have at least some sort of income and at least, a start, to get the family, assimilated into this country. So, yeah, I think, the loneliness, number one, you've left, behind your wife. I can't imagine leaving behind your kids, especially, being a father and having two daughters and now a grandson. I can't imagine leaving them, behind. I can't even imagine ever leaving Florida, right? They're fortunate for me, all of them live in Florida. And so to leave and go to a different country without them, would be very, very, very difficult. So
Heartbreaking.
heartbreaking for sure.
And it's beautiful to hear that a family that was able to get here a little sooner was willing to help out
Right.
someone they probably didn't know. But that's really cool that the community continued to
Very much
uplift.
so, and I remember them speaking very fondly of a lot of these, friends for many, many years. They were eternally grateful for those that gave them a helping hand back in those days, and, eventually, once they did come, for, my older brothers, my sister, my mom, and my grandmother on my mom's side, once they came over, um you know, it was about, I think, 7 months later. I don't know exactly the timeline, but it was many, many months after my dad had come over first. Um, Now, my mom becomes pregnant with me. So, wasn't the best timing, right? So, my siblings always used to kind of tease me when I was younger that I was a big mistake. So, my only rebuttal, at least to try to, to get back at them was to say, "Yeah, at least I was made with a lot of passion." So,
Yeah, very true.
whether that's true or not, who knows? But, yeah, it was again, adverse, circumstances. And my mom does recall, back in those days that there were other friends of theirs that said, "You cannot have that child, right? That's irresponsible. You've got, given your situation." And my mom was very steadfast in saying, "Oh no, that child's going to be born here, and they will be raised here and, they will live their life here."
Was it because of where they were located that people felt that way? Or was it economically that it'd be hard to
I think it
care
was
for?
it was the economic,
Yeah,
scenario, obviously, But my mom used to say, where 3 kids could eat, 4 can eat. So she was a very, very strong woman, an entrepreneur, a tremendous mom. Her kids were everything to her, a wonderful partner to my dad. And, but she was very steadfast and very, uh, confident in saying that, "No, this, we're gonna have this child."
adamant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about your parents when they get to America. Your dad was working several jobs. What were some of the things he had to do when he got here?
Mostly factory work. There were a couple of companies up there. I think remember the name. One of them was Hankin. Just manufacturing jobs. So they're working in factories. So my dad, that was he got the job again through connections, and he was working that factory job full time, and then he had two part time jobs in addition to that. So my dad was, had 3 jobs and was working, extensively. The story goes that he did not see the kids. I mean, he was constantly working. He really had no ability or time to see us. But that he would wake us up early on a Sunday morning to, at least spend some time with us because that was his only opportunity, to see his kids and to spend time with his kids. Otherwise, he was just working constantly. My mom as well also, got a job working in a factory for a while. Um, and then my dad eventually started working for a large grocery store company over there, kind of similar to Publix. It was called Supermarkets General. And so he started, that was he was the one that had the steady paycheck, right? The dependable job. That was really his character, right? He was always a very dependable, person. And for him, his objective was, I'm the one that needs to generate the steady amount of income, the more predictable income. My mom was an entrepreneur, so she eventually started selling clothes out of the basement of our house in Elizabeth, New Jersey, to a lot of her friends. A lot of Cuban friends that were in New Jersey, And that gradually grew and grew. And eventually she was fortunate enough and successful enough to open up a clothing store, a retail clothing store on Elizabeth Avenue in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And I've got fond memories of that as well because I was going to Catholic school, not too far from there. At the time, it felt like it was very, very far distance because I was in elementary school. But I remember leaving elementary school and then walking, probably about, 10 blocks or more to my mom's clothing store. And I'd get there right after school and I would go in the back and she had like a little calculator back there. And that's how I would entertain myself is playing on this 10 key calculator in the back of my mom's, clothing store while she was, there managing the store and dealing with customers. And so, yeah, they were very, very, very hardworking folks. That's one of the things that I'm very, very thankful for is that they instilled that work ethic in all of us kids. And to this day, I still can't thank them enough, for being such a great example, of hardworking, making sacrifices, for themselves, for the family. And to this day, I think even my kids, and all of their grandchildren and great grandchildren to this day, are still, learning those lessons and are probably thankful to them because we try to share all of these stories with them, with the future generations, so that they can appreciate, what their grandfather, their grandmother, grandparents did way back in the day.
The role models,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Very much
And
so.
you really described the testament that they were able to be. So, do you have fond memories of spending time with your dad as a young kid? He's working so many
Mhm.
jobs. Do you have fond memories that Sunday mornings you guys would do a certain activity?
He was working a lot.
Yeah.
So, when I was engaged in sports as a youngster, he really did not have an opportunity to come out and, see me at different sporting events. And that's perfectly okay. Right.
Yeah.
Certainly understood, the sacrifice of him working hard and continuing to support his family. So both of them were just working constantly. So, when I really got to spend a lot of time with him was later on after we moved here to Florida, and he was retired. I would go visit them, in the afternoon, and we would go on the back porch, and just start asking him questions about the country, about his experiences. The same with my mom, and that's really where my fondest memories are of spending time with them and learning about more about them, the family, and learning more about their experience and life in Cuba.
Yeah. As a kid, I like to think about the food I grew up eating. And you hear these stories, so I
Yeah.
think of the food that my dad grew up eating and so on and so forth. Do you remember certain foods?
Oh yeah. The,
What
the
were
the food. I mean, the food. I mean, for Cuban families, Hispanic families, food is it's a big thing. It's a big deal. Um, Blessed with a grandmother and a mom that were phenomenal cooks. So I mean, it's all of the the staples of Cuban cuisine. Chicken and rice, right? Black beans, and rice. Breaded steak. Plantains, Cuban sandwiches. It's just all of those excellent cooks, and the desserts too. Very unique desserts. That when I describe the desserts to Americans here, it surprises them that how did they ever come up with this concoction, for this dessert? And I think it was, and I asked my mom about it, and it's like they lived a life of scarcity, so they tried to use everything that they could,
Mhm.
and so some of that shows up in the different recipes for desserts.
They get creative.
They got very creative.
What's one thing that sounds pretty creative or is?
There was this dessert called dulce de naranja, which was I remember my grandmother would peel grapefruit skins, peel grapefruits. And I mean, I remember her just sitting down and, with a peeler, just, peeling away. And then they would slice it and then they would remove all of the pulp. So it was the part in between, which I think is, I don't know if it's called, I forget what they call that. Um, they would cut that into sections, right? So they remove the outer skin, they remove the pulp, and then they would take those and they would put them into like a pressure cooker with a lot of sugar, right? A lot of sugar. And they would make this dessert that when that was done, it was kind of like a gelatinous kind of texture to the dessert, and of course it was a very nice, very sweet, syrupy sauce to go along with it, and that was the dessert. So they would serve that along with like cream cheese, so that's what I grew up with. But I'm like, how the heck did they come up with this idea to use that part of the grapefruit? But again, it was just scarcity. So they made sure that they used, everything that they could.
What they had,
Yeah,
definitely. So you grew up in New Jersey. Ultimately, you attended Trenton State College, and then you went to Montclair State
that's
University.
right.
What did you study when you went to college?
So when I was always good at math. So, when I took my SATs, I, got a great math score, not so great in the English or verbal side. And so back then, people told me like, "Well, then you should go into computer science." So I'm good at math, so go into computer science. That's going to be, a popular profession. So that's what I did. I became a computer science major, and quite honestly, I didn't like it at all. It was really not employing a whole lot of math. It was like learning a foreign language, and I was did not do well. So, I did probably average in my freshman year, and then in my sophomore year when I moved over to Montclair, I was living in the dorms with a lot of high school friends, and, was not a good student, and I did not like computer science, and, quite frankly, at the end of that 2nd term, I was put on academic probation. That was a major wake-up call for me. I remember, going back home and letting my parents know of the situation. And my older brother, Raul, he's 10 years older than me. Um, because my dad wasn't around again working so much. My older brother, was very influential in my life. He was a voice of reason. And so he sat me down. He's like, what are you doing? You're wasting time. Said, I don't know what I want to do. He said, well, what are you good at? Said, well, I like math. All right. But I don't like this computer science thing. And so, he had some friends. He had been through college. He had experience. And he said, well, I've got a friend of mine who's a certified public accountant. He's a CPA. Take an accounting class. He says he uses a lot of math. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I've wasted 2 years of my life essentially. Um, and I need to get serious about school. And so I moved back home with my family, and I went to a local community college and I took an accounting course. And the light bulb came on. Everything clicked. Accounting to me was just very intuitive, very logical. It was very easy. I know it sounds bizarre, but I loved it. Not that many people say they love accounting, but I did. I liked it a lot, probably because it came easy to me. And I also took a course in psychology at that time, and that also, fascinated me as well. So that's what I decided to do, was to go ahead and get my degree in accounting, and so now I had to kind of make up for lost time, and so I went to school pretty much constantly, during winter break, during summer break, to kind of to catch up. And then in 1984, my parents were pretty much at the point where they were starting to think about retiring. My sister had moved to Florida, um, and my oldest brother, his wife, they had moved to Florida as well. And so it seemed like Florida was in the future for the family. And so, I looked around New Jersey and said, well, what's going to really keep me here? The weather's pretty nice in Florida. My family's going to be there. So I'm going to move to Florida. So that's what I did in 1984. I came down and moved here, stayed with my sister. On the drive down, I came down with my mom. and she started, searching for real estate. She started looking for a house, and she found one. And then she went back and she told my dad, um, "We're going to move to Florida." So he put in for his retirement. She ended up selling her store, and they moved. They moved to Florida I think in the latter part of '84, and so and I finished up school here. So I did get my degree in accounting, and got my first job in accounting, working at AT&T for a period of time. Met someone there whose husband was working as a tax manager at it's a former publishing company. Excuse me, Harcourt Brace Ivanovich has changed ownership over many years, and he was from New York. And I met him. We hit it off. He was from New York, I'm from New Jersey, so we kind of had similar experiences. And so he hired me, and I worked in the corporate tax department there for about 2.5 years. Learned a lot of good lessons there. I enjoyed it, but it also, kind of crystallized in my mind that I did not want to be in corporate life. And I think this is the influence that my mom has had, on me, being an entrepreneur, right? Wanting to work for herself. So I've got elements of both of my parents, right? Certainly, I've heard from a lot of folks that, like very similar to my dad in many ways. But definitely, I feel like my entrepreneurial drive was definitely, fostered by my mom. And so there was a gentleman that I met at a wedding of one of the people that I worked with. He was a certified financial planner, and we got to talking. I was interested in investments at the time, and one thing led to another. And he said he was starting a company on his own, and would I be interested in doing it? I said, sure. I'm 25 years old. I'm not married. I have no kids. If I'm going to roll the dice, this is the time to do it. I can definitely tell you that my parents thought I was crazy to do that at the time because it was a good job that I had at Harcourt. It was dependable. It was paying, making good money. And so, for them, having gone through their life experience, they wanted to see their son have the safety and the security of a dependable paycheck, right? And I said, no, I've got to try this and I got to do it. And so I did. And, that's, kind of was uh, the very beginning of what has now, become, a much larger, more successful financial planning, wealth management career for me.
Very neat.
Yeah,
You received your Series 7.
I did.
Explain what that is.
So that's the exam that you take to become, what back in the day was called a stockbroker, right? It's a broker's license. So that gives you the ability to sell securities, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, limited partnerships, and those kinds of things. That it's changed over the years. I mean, people are still getting their Series 7, but that's really under the brokerage world. The brokerage world is very transactional based, but that's really kind of your foray into finance and personal financial planning. At least it was back in those days in 1987. So, I left Harcourt in September. I took my Series 7 exam. The first time I took it, I didn't pass because I felt like I've got this. This can't be that hard. And no, it was a hard exam. And so luckily, back then they give the exam every month. So I immediately took it the next month. I really, buttoned down and started really studying, and so fortunately passed it. And if you're, a student of stock market history, you know what happened in October the 19th of 1987, which is very famously known as Black Monday. I had no idea the magnitude of what was about to happen, or even when it was happening, that, a stock market would drop over 20% in one day. But that's literally what happened.
I did my research. It was a couple years before my time, so I don't
Sure.
remember
Yeah.
1987, but Black Monday was on October 19th, 1987. It was a stock market crash where the Dow Jones dropped 22.6% in one day.
It's staggering to think of in today's dollars. Yeah.
That evaporated over half a trillion dollars worth
Yeah.
of market value in a day,
In a day.
one day. So, what do you do after that?
It was so early, it was the beginning of my career. So there was not a lot on the line for me personally at that time, right? But the the pressure, of and the magnitude of what happened, um, and how it really kind of sent shudders through the entire industry, was the scary part. So it's like, oh, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? Just changing careers and getting into financial planning right at the beginning of the single worst day in market history. So, um, but for me, I could not go back. I wanted to be successful in this industry. And so you just keep plugging away. And that's what we did. Myself and the other gentleman who hired me, we started doing a lot of financial plans for different brokers. So brokers back then, they were mostly, in the transaction side of the business. So they would, be transacting different investments for clients, but financial planning was starting to become, a little bit more popular. Where clients are, coming up with goals and objectives and planning their finances to achieve, retirement at some future point in time. And then the financial planning industry was forming as a profession. So it was very early on in that time. And so my partner and I would actually prepare the financial plans that were presented to these different clients, that allowed the financial representatives to also, transact different investments for those clients, different mutual funds and partnerships and so forth. And having an accounting background, as a numbers cruncher guy, I'd love doing it, and so I liked building those plans. For me, it's a nice project, right? There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. At least there was in during those times, because those were not those were clients that we just presented a plan for, and so we did that for a period of time. And He eventually left Florida. He went back to Wisconsin. He was going through, a divorce, and so he left. We had been doing a lot of financial plans for a local financial planning firm, and so I stayed and was now the only one that was doing preparing those plans. That company is still around today, and they've thrived and they've done extremely well. And there's a couple of individuals that worked there. That one in particular, his name is Joe Burt, who gave me, a great start. He welcomed me into the firm and he saw, I think, what my potential was. And he worked with me, and I, did a lot of financial plans and worked, at that firm for many years. And like I said, they're a very successful firm. Joe's been a fantastic, mentor very early in my career. I think he continues to be in the industry, and we're still in contact from time to time. So I'm very eternally grateful to him for that opportunity. But Again, the entrepreneurial part in me, I kind of saw a different path. And at that time, the industry was kind of, starting to bifurcate. There were obviously in the past, everything was transaction based, it was like, commission based. And then as the financial planning profession was growing, there was also, kind of a movement to a different compensation model, which was to work just for fees, right? Not a transaction, but fee for service. That model to me was where I felt most comfortable, right? To me, building, a lasting business is not necessarily one that, I don't want to start from scratch, on January 1st, you're starting from zero and you got to do it all over again. And there's very, very successful people that do that, that do a great job for their clients. Absolutely. But I had a different vision and a different mindset. And luckily, the industry started moving more and more in that direction. Fast forward now, 30 some odd years. And now most of the wealth management industry is really, fee only or fee based. It's really moved away from transaction, commission based, compensation. So, maybe it was just pure dumb luck on my part, but I felt like that was kind of where the industry was going. And so I met a couple other, you know, advisors at that firm. We shared kind of the same philosophy, and then in 1998, we decided to break off and do our own thing. Um, a lot of mixed feelings at the time because, again, Joe gave us a great opportunity, and but we felt like we needed to pursue, what we, where our heart was taking us and where our mind was taking us as well. And so we did that. We formed the entity in July of 1998. We, rented some office space in December, starting December of 1998. So it was, I had two other partners. So there were three founders, myself, Charlie, and Susan. And we brought along three assistants. And we started what's, today is Moisand Fitzgerald Tamayo, which is now, morphed into probably about a $1.4 billion, firm with 33 staff, multiple offices, and, a lot of additional partners, multi-generation now. So, along the way, been blessed with very, very good partners. Charlie in particular has been, a fantastic partner, business partner for me. Later on, we merged with Dan Moisand, who's now one of the other named partners. We all have, complementary skill set, so that's very helpful. And so we each have our strengths and weaknesses, but they complement each other. And I couldn't ask for, for better business partners, to go through, this very long journey with. It's been terrific. It's been a lot of hard work, a lot of risk, to say the least. To again, not necessarily that we were starting from scratch, but when I got started in 1987, it was starting from scratch. Because I do remember the amount specifically that I was being paid when I first got into financial planning. It was $1,500 a month, 18,000 a year. That was enough to cover my rent, my car payment, and buy some food and have a little bit of fun. And that, he was able to pay me for a period of time. And then at some point he said, yeah, there's not enough revenue coming in. So again, I'm not going back. And so when I was working at Harcourt, I started doing tax return work for folks. And so that's what I decided to do. I said, okay, well, how am I going to supplement this, diminishing, or lower income? Said, okay, I'm just going to go out and start hustling and start preparing some tax returns for people and charge fees. And that's what I did. And so that aspect of the business, kind of came into fruition where, now part of my financial planning practice was also tax preparation and tax compliance. And so that started growing and growing. And so that helped, that allowed me to stay in the profession. And right now, that's actually a major part of our firm today is, the tax compliance, the advanced tax planning work that we do. That's probably where it really all started.
Wow. Continued to this day.
Continuing to this day, yeah,
Very neat.
it's now it's becoming a growing part of the firm's revenue. Um, and so we do a lot of it. We do a lot of tax preparation. So we prepare returns for probably about over 700 tax returns. We do have a lot of expertise, in small business tax preparation and compliance, and really tax planning. A lot of it in the commercial real estate side of the business. And so, yeah, it's still, a big part of the business. It's not the majority of the revenue by any stretch of the imagination because it's a difficult to leverage, that type of business because it's labor intensive. Even though we've become very efficient in a lot of the tools that we can use today, of course, now with AI becoming more prominent in part of our lives and business world every day, we certainly can squeeze efficiencies, from using AI and different technological tools. But the bottom line is you still have to have a person that is either, preparing the return, reviewing the return, approving the return, interacting with clients, providing very good, exceptional, customer service. And so there's only so much that you can automate of that. Maybe over time it'll get better and better, but Yeah, it's still, still a very prominent part of the firm.
AI may do more and more, but no, if a decimal place or comma is in the wrong place, that
Big
could
mistake,
that could be a
especially if it's
really,
taxes. Yeah.
really big mistake,
Yeah.
right?
You don't
Um,
want to make those mistakes on tax returns. And so
exactly.
we go through a pretty extensive process of reviewing and approving the returns. That's really where my role is mostly in now. Back in the day, I was the only one that was preparing returns. It probably got up to the point of about preparing around 250 to 300 returns. And then we started, teaching our younger financial, analysts, how to do tax returns. My philosophy was always that, if they were good in taxes, it's going to make them a better planner. And then, being part of a planning firm that does, tax work, it was going to make us better at tax preparation as well. So it seems to be a very good combination. Clients love it because they can kind of one-stop shop, for the most part. But yeah, you don't want to make uh, m- big mistakes. A decimal point, it can cost you a lot of money.
Changes a lot.
Yeah,
You mentioned risk. There's a lot of risk in starting any business, any venture. And before in 1987, you noted something. I looked at Black Monday as this catastrophic event that it was, but you made a very unique point that you weren't established yet.
right.
So you didn't really lose much.
Correct.
I can only imagine people that were in business decades and then that collapses everything.
I mean, the stories of people jumping out of windows, it's a story for a reason because that's what actually happened. People's uh, entire worth, net worth probably was, vanished or was significantly, affected overnight. So there were, especially if they were employing leverage, which is, the horror stories of using leverage is where, you can be wiped out literally overnight. And so those stories, were true for some people, and so it was a very frightening thing for the industry. Again, for me, I was new to the business, so I really could not fully appreciate the magnitude of what had happened until I was further along in my career, and then realized, wow, as I'm managing clients, their net worth, their investable assets, and really their emotions because money and emotion go hand in hand. People probably almost more emotional about money than anything else, and so it's scary. What's the strongest emotion that we experience as human beings is fear. And when you see a market down, I couldn't even fathom being down 22%. So we've got a Dow, that's what, close to 50,000 today. That would drop. That's probably a 10,000 point drop in a day. You tell that to people, they probably can't really even fathom the magnitude of that. And so, yeah, it was probably a crazy time for a lot of people at that time. But later on, as I'm working with clients and seeing how their emotions change just over a 5%, a 10% drop. COVID was one of the worst times, most fearful times for clients, and even for us as practitioners and owners of a business. It was a scary time. This is something that's never happened before. So it's the fear of the unknown, and but we stuck to our guns. The discipline. Everything that we've read in stock market history. And so you learn from those lessons. And that's probably one of the things that I learned, coming out of Black Monday was that people that sold everything, or got out of the market and never got back in again, they were permanently impaired. They lost out on the opportunity that eventually, came out of Black Monday. Because I believe by the end of 1987, the market closed higher than it had started the year. So even despite a 22% drop in one day, it still ended up, going higher. But I believe the S&P 500 or was the Dow, I think, dropped to about 1,500 on that day from 2,200. Think of that today. Now the Dow is close to 50,000. So it's just incredible how, there's that old cliche. It's not timing the market, but time in the market. And it's true. It's a cliche for a reason because there's truth to it. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of people do spend a lot of time trying to time the market because they don't want to experience the downside. But, that's risk. To get the reward, you've got to take the risk. So that's one of the trade-offs is to occasionally have to gut through those downturns.
You've mentioned risk numerous times. Describe some lessons that you had to learn through entrepreneurship.
Um, Certainly, the difficulties around the great financial crisis, that was a very difficult time for us, for the firm. We were going through two major events at that time. One of the founders of the business, Susan, decided to, break off and do her own thing for various reasons, and she ended up, she continued to be successful in her endeavors. And but that also took about one fourth of the revenue along with it. And simultaneously, we're now going through the great financial crisis, which saw the market drop over 50% over a period of about a year and a half. So that's a significant drop in revenue. Um, but we had great staff, we had great people. We didn't want to let anyone go, and we didn't. Right? Um, did we, furlough and reduce, some hours to kind of manage the expenses? Certainly we did for a period of time, but we almost immediately, stopped that once we saw that there was light at the end of the tunnel, right? And so risk is scary, for sure. Um, but perseverance, can be extremely, extremely rewarding. And had we just folded up shop and said, "Yeah, we're not going to make it through this," um, I'd never be here with you right now, in this wonderful environment, in front of this beautiful car, probably even having this conversation. Yeah.
Definitely. These are lessons I want to pass on because I wasn't around for Black Monday. So if I don't learn from the times it already occurred, I won't be able to be prepared if it happens again.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
And entrepreneurship's a scary thing. There's a reason not everyone does it. Failure, I want to say failure is imminent. Doesn't mean that you're gone,
Right.
right?
Right.
But you're going to experience failure
That's right.
in just a matter of time, right? And like I said, risk came up several times
Yeah.
in your experience. I was thinking if you were to give a TED talk, it won't be right now, but if you were to talk about just one lesson that you would want to teach about entrepreneurship, what would your talk be about?
Um, that's a great, great question. Entrepreneurship is you're going to work more hours than you ever have if you were working for someone else. Yeah, without a doubt. I can tell people that if you're doing it because you want to work less hours, you're doing it for exactly the wrong reason. When we started the firm, we were working a lot of hours. But I can tell you they were, in hindsight, and even at the moment, they were very personally gratifying because you're doing it for yourself. And you're doing it, because you have a certain vision. Um, and, um, you know, especially once you have a certain sense of responsibility because now you have employees. So it's not just yourself, right? It's my fellow partners, right, that I have a responsibility to. It's the employees that we're hiring, that we're giving them, a standard of living that we're responsible for. And so you have to you got to persevere through that. And so again, getting back to adversity, where I feel like experiencing adversity is good for folks. We never want to experience it, but it teaches us lessons that it's okay to experience adversity because now what can we learn from it? What can we learn from those mistakes? How can we adapt and how can we do better to try to avoid those things in the future? For me, being, part of a partnership was, extremely, extremely important for me. I knew that I'd never wanted to just be the only person that had to make all of the decisions because I never felt like I would always have the right answers, right? But if I had other business partners like I have in the past and like I do to this day, I feel very, very confident that we're going to get to the right answers, right? Because Maybe not one or two of us or three of us might not have it, but others will. And you got to trust in the consensus of the group, right? Of the decision makers. And so entrepreneurship, teaches you, perseverance, hard work, sacrifice, because there's other parts of your life that you are definitely going to sacrifice in that endeavor. But the reward is phenomenal. It really is, and I don't mean that in a financial sense. It's so personally gratifying. For me at this stage in my career, being 63 years old, and quite honestly, at the tail end of my career, I want to work for as long as I can, both mentally and physically, and blessed with good health so far. Um, I want to feel you know how you've given a living for a lot of other folks that have a great job, they have a career, they've gotten married, they've got families. We have folks at our firm that started as an intern, right? And we hired him, as a full-time employee, and he was an analyst, and he became an advisor, and now he's part owner in the firm. That's, for me, is probably one of the more gratifying things that I think that the original three, I call myself, Charlie and Dan, the original three as founders, that we're probably the most proud of, is to see, that we've provided the opportunity for these folks, to do well in a profession and grow and flourish and become an owner. And now they're kind of an entrepreneur too, right? Because now they're going to see things in a different light. So a lot of great lessons from being an entrepreneur. It's tough. It's a tough business to be in it, and but certainly don't do it for the wrong reasons. Don't do it because, oh, I want to make the big bucks and I just want to have freedom to come and go as I please. It's going to be quite the contrary. You're going to be risking a lot of capital, and you're going to be working a lot of hours. So do it for the right reasons.
You mentioned trust among not only partners, but also the people that you take on with the team,
Mhm.
right?
Yes,
And then you want them to prosper. And you mentioned how
absolutely.
starting from internship may have been paid, may not have even been paid, and now they're a partner
Mm.
in the firm, which is remarkable. So that trust, and in order to prosper, you have to foster a community and a culture. How do you do that from the top down?
Great question. We have frequent meetings with the entire staff. So every quarter, we gather as an entire company, even with folks that are out of state. So they'll come in, and we have a pretty, almost a full day, staff meeting of just going over all the different things that are happening at the company. As you grow over time, you know, uh, culture becomes a little bit more challenging because there's a little bit more disconnectedness, because there's so many folks. But it is very, very important. My business partner Charlie does, a great job of helping with culture. The same with the other partners as well. It's something that we certainly, work hard towards. I sit down, for lunch every day, and I sit down with, the employees. I like just sitting down for an hour and chatting with them about various things. Maybe they're business related, maybe they're personal related, and it's sports, it's just different things that are happening. That for me is how I get, more of a vibe of what the culture is like, and kind of continuing to instill, culture within the firm itself. I never want to give the impression as though I'm in some sort of ivory tower and I'm not going to, spend time with employees. They're equally as important, as I am to the firm. There's not a job that's beneath anyone at the firm. That's something that we've always talked about, and everyone, we go through a pretty extensive hiring process because we always want to make sure that we're hiring more for attitude than aptitude. Aptitude is certainly important, which you can certainly sometimes teach. But having the right attitude is so much more important. You can't really change attitude. And so someone that's, really a team player. I know it sounds cliche in the business world, but there's truth to it. Where you're willing to, help other team members, and just, rally the troops, if someone's out, if someone's down, if someone's not available, for us, it's, we want to pride ourselves in giving outstanding customer service. Our clients are the most important to us, right? Our employees the same. And so we want to continue to foster that kind of culture of good service, honesty, character. It's important that there's that communication and that you maintain kind of that connectedness with all of your employees. That gets more and more challenging the bigger you grow.
A strong castle requires every brick,
It's a great way to say it. Yeah.
right? You can't just skip
Yeah.
where this person's not important. These holes will slowly just crumble the biggest
Yeah. If
masterpieces,
there's cracks in the foundation,
right?
it's gonna crumble at some point. Yeah.
And I would describe you have a very solid pulse on the community, right? And the ultimate answer that you described and alluded to was time. You have to spend time with these people.
Right.
You noted the ivory tower. You can't spend time if you're this far away and you're not at lunch and not in meetings and you're skipping. And, now with AI, the AI will just
Right.
summarize the Zoom call
Right.
and you're just reading these notes. It's
Yeah.
very different if we sat down and we're like, Ron, I'm struggling with this. And with your 28 years of experience just in this one firm, you could say, oh, I've already encountered that. Here's how we fix that.
Right.
And you could help them.
Right.
But if we don't have this conversation,
That
that
doesn't happen.
that could be grazed over in an email.
Yeah. And it
Right?
doesn't happen over a Zoom call either.
It doesn't.
One of the biggest challenges to culture and what you're describing was COVID. When everyone, had to work from home. And I remember the time very, very vividly. Um, I see I see the advantages of working from home up to a point, but I've always been an advocate that there's nothing like an office environment, the exchange of ideas, the freestyle nature of interactions and conversations that happen in an 8-hour workday in an office environment, where you can just you've got a question, you can just, either, just get up, walk down the hall and ask. You don't get that kind of camaraderie when everyone is isolated in these little silos working from home. I totally get the convenience aspect of it. I like it from time to time as well for certain types of work that I need to do. Something that really requires a lot of, focus, no distractions. But during COVID, I continued to go to the office. Luckily I was able to because being in the tax business, we were allowed to do that. And so I continued to go to the office. There were a few other folks that did the same because, and actually they were people that had just, started at the company. So they kind of felt lost, like, oh no, I've just started with this company and now I'm working from home. They felt disconnected and they wanted to keep going to the office. So they saw that, I was still going to the office. And that was challenging, but I think it really taught all of us that while that works, for maybe an occasional day or two, it's not really going to be conducive to foster an environment and a culture of cooperation, of great service, of working together as a team. Um, so, I think COVID was really something was the great experiment to see, was that something that was, could culture still survive beyond that? And I think it would be really, really difficult for it to survive just a complete working from home kind of situation for a lot of companies. I mean, I think that works for some, but I think in our industry, it's not the right not the right work environment for us.
It's organic that when you're chatting over Zoom all day, it's just different. You're not going to pick up physical cues. You're not going to realize like, oh, this person's tired or there's just subtle cues that you only get in person. And that's truly why unless there's a pandemic, I only want to do these in person. because it changes everything. Where we get to sit down, we're surrounded by a couple dozen cars. We get to smell the fuel, the feeling of being in a garage, and we get to chat. And I could just see you in person, and we can go back and forth. And the perfect word is organic.
That's right.
It's not just fake. On the other side of a screen, I can't tell if you're fidgeting or you're kind of just like looking on your phone and you're sending out tweets or something.
Right.
And like, if I'm losing you, I'm losing you. But in person, we could just have this conversation of, wow, I never thought of that way. Um, and it's uniquely human. I don't think AI will ever be able to grasp that.
I completely agree.
People
Yeah.
describe it as soul. And again, it can regurgitate stuff, but it's just different.
It is very different. And AI is going to be immensely helpful. It's going to make us incredibly more efficient at different things that we do in whatever profession or whatever business it is that we have. Um, but it's certainly not going to replace. I almost don't like the fact that they call it artificial intelligence. Um, because I think human beings, have the intellect, um, and can exercise judgment. And I think that's ultimately what's most important. Doesn't mean that those humans don't make mistakes from time to time, right? And by the way, AI makes mistakes because we use it in our practice. And, before, if we ain't do any kind of research, now we have to spend time verifying that what was provided to us as the research, through AI is actually correct. So a useful tool, but not a replace for human interactions, for culture, the organic nature of interactions like you and I are having today, like I have, and we have at our office in downtown Orlando and in Melbourne and in Texas, and just and in my hobby that I'm in, right? That's certainly nothing that can be done, remotely. And so, a big aspect of even the growth of the business over many, many years has been, the networking that I've done from the very, very beginning, of getting to know people, going out in the community, having those, personal interactions, actually spending a little bit of time teaching financial planning courses at UCF. I did that for about a year, a little bit, almost a year and a half. And just seeing what that was like to be a teacher, right? To get up in front of a classroom of students, that were full time workers in banking and insurance, and to think very quickly, on your feet because they would ask some pretty challenging questions. Gave me an appreciation for, how difficult it is to be an educator and a teacher. Luckily, I didn't have to deal with too many of the personality issues, or behavioral issues that a lot of teachers have to deal with younger kids. But it gave me an appreciation for, what it's like for the work that they do. And again, that's the best way to do that is not, teaching remotely and having a bunch of remote students. It's having a classroom of individuals, and having different interactions and working with each other, for the greater good.
Yeah, it's authentic
Mhm.
and it's real and it's almost textile, right? Or
Right.
you could
Yep.
feel it.
It's tangible.
Tangible.
Yeah,
That's a better word.
that's right.
People ask me, I had an interview last week and they have a podcast. They interview people and they were asking me kind of my thought process. How do I do some things? What do I like? What do I not like? And they're asking me, how do I come up with these questions? And they asked me, do you use AI? And I said, genuinely, no. My answer is not. Like, I don't do that. I try to think, I learn a little bit about you. I may have a conversation beforehand. I
Mhm.
prefer to. And I try to come up with when I have the opportunity, if I have the opportunity to sit down with a person of this experience, what would I want to know? And how can I share and convey their story in a real way?
Right.
Right. Because not every person in a financial firm is going to be a first generation American and have really cool hobbies and do all these
Yeah.
other things, right?
Right.
So I can't just regurgitate these questions to every financial firm
That's
guest
a great point. Yeah.
that I have, right? Or even if you're a podcast host or an athlete or anything else. If you're playing in the PGA, I can't ask you the same questions if you're in the NHL,
That's right.
right? Tiger
Yeah.
Woods is not getting tackled on ice
That's
with
right.
skates. So you can't just regurgitate these
Yeah.
questions. And I don't want to use AI because I want these to be my questions that I want to know. And I think other people are going to value too.
I agree. Yeah.
And because of that, it would be significantly faster if I just talked into my phone and it would just write it down or talk to my computer or whatever. I choose not to do that. I write all of my notes. I have like, I think I have close to a dozen of my own personal notebooks at this point, but I write down notes on the guest. Then I write down my first draft of questions, and they always get hairy. They get rough. I'm crossing things out.
Yeah.
I'm moving things around. I don't like the order. And then I transcribe them to a nice, pretty notebook like this one. And as I do that, I think of other questions. I'm like,
Right.
how did I not think of that the first time? But if I just talked into my phone and just tell it to record and then it just prints it out,
Right.
it's fake, it's
It's different.
artificial.
Yep.
And if I'm sitting here, I'm not trying to knock other people. If I'm sitting here with a screen, I could easily get distracted of just looking at the screen.
Sure.
This notebook's not talking to me. And I look down and it's my handwriting, which is unique to each person. So,
And I
uh,
think it helps you remember everything that you're writing
of
down.
course,
Um, my business partner Charlie, copious note taker. He's got I can't even imagine how many yellow pads of notes that he has. It's kind of a standing joke around the firm because I'm not as good of a note taker as he is by any stretch. But that's how he thinks and processes, right? I think I've been blessed with a good memory. And so I do tend to retain a lot of things mentally. Um, he is a copious note taker. So as he's writing notes, it's kind of reinforcing, what it is that he's writing, the thoughts, the ideas, the feedback that, that he has from whatever it is that he's listening to. So, and I think that's probably, what you're experiencing as well.
it
It's
helps.
reinforcing exactly what it is that you're writing down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a practice because I'm guilty where I don't write everything down for everything else, but it's way easier if I write out my thoughts, especially when I've written them more than once. I'm familiar with the questions, I'm familiar with the order, but also I can sit and enjoy our conversation and think of other things and follow-up questions, and then I can come right back on track with my notes. So the big thing that I'm definitely an advocate for. To wrap up chatting about the financial firm, you've been doing it for 28 years. We've noted AI, computing, and computers in general have gotten more and more advanced. How has your job changed in the 28 years since you started the firm?
Um, it's a bigger firm, so certainly it takes more time to manage the firm itself, to manage the business. We've gone from three, staff, three employees to, over 30, with multiple offices. I'm the chief financial officer at the firm. So, luckily I work with Sarah Nash, who's one of the partners, and she's a phenomenal, operations, manager, that really helps, you know, me. We help each other in managing the finances and handling the accounting and the payroll and all of those responsibilities. Those just take up much more of our day, takes up much more time. So, in some ways, the role changes. I still see clients. I'm still managing, a lot of client relationships. I'm still involved in, reviewing tax returns as well. So still a lot of responsibilities. But I do feel the tug of war every day of when you go in, it's the tug of war of, what needs to be done, to manage the business, to take care of, the numbers, the finances, et cetera. Um, and then obviously, first and foremost, it's always the clients, and it's, also employees as well. So your time, you're being pulled in more directions than very early on. Very early on, you're just in pure survival mode and just, generating business and networking and, establishing those relationships. And so it's much more focused, um, because all of the other responsibilities are not there yet. Now they are, and it will continue to grow. And that's why, the evolution of any firm, it's always very different uh, when founders of a firm get to a certain point. and a certain size, it's very difficult for them to relinquish that. But I do believe it's very important for them to be cognizant of the fact that that might not necessarily be their best skill set anymore, right? Entrepreneurs are really great at being entrepreneurs. They're not always the best at managing a large enterprise. And perhaps at some point it's best, and it's a difficult decision, right? Because you have to reinvest that capital back into the business as opposed to taking it out in the form of a profit. You've got to reinvest in your business. You always have to do that, right? For it to continue to grow and thrive and, be something that's sustainable well beyond your years. And given the size that we're at today, I think, we're going through those growing pains. We always, the three of us kid around, myself, Charlie, and Dan, is it ever going to, it's never going to be done, right? There's always something left to do. But, the shorter answer to your question is just feeling um, uh, much more pulled in different directions.
I didn't think of it till you said the answer. Would you compare it to parenting?
Yeah, in some ways, it's very true. Because when you have the newborn, now I can kind of relate because now as a grandparent, um, I see what my daughter and my son-in-law are going through, and I used to always wonder, like, talking with grandparents in the past before I was one myself, they talked about how wonderful it was, and I'd be like, well, I mean, okay, how different could it be from being a parent? And it's radically different because when you're the parent, you are in it, you are focused, right? It's feeding the child, changing the child, and sleep. I mean, those are the three things, and lack of sleep will crush anyone's enthusiasm, right? So, you're so focused on those things that you almost don't have time as much, like perhaps like I do now, when I interact with my grandson, of seeing just the beauty of this newborn child and just the subtle, small little changes that he's going through that I see from time to time, every few weeks when I go and see him, just how he's just moving around and he's discovering. When you're a parent, you're just so busy. So back to the business world, you're right. We don't have as much time. We're no longer like doing all of the things that we had to do early on. But now we're managing, a group of adults, right? It's not a newborn. It's not an infant anymore. It's, it's grown and it's developed over the years, and it takes a different kind of management and eventually probably different skill sets from different people to really continue to help that grow. Because there's even, uh, even if you brought on managers today, and at some point, there'll be, we'll go through that process, that are not at the firm today. If the firm is, triple its size, quadruple its size, 10 times its size, sometime way beyond, my years. And God willing that will be the situation. We're definitely building an enterprise that we want it to continue well beyond our career.
Just
And
like parenting,
yeah,
right?
that's right.
And I'm gonna call it a phenomenon. I don't know. People can debate that in the comments, but I think it's a uniquely human phenomenon that all of us start off as kids and we see our parents and we have that perspective. And then hopefully we see our grandparents, we have that perspective. But as you move through life, eventually, hopefully, a lot of us become parents ourselves.
Right.
We change, we may not see the change in ourselves, but we get to witness our parents become grandparents.
That's right. Yeah.
And then that relationship, because you only see your parents as mom and dad, but your children see them as grandma and
That's
grandpa,
grandma and grandpa. Yeah.
or abuelo and
Hmm.
abuela.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to be polite.
No, you're right.
Uh, you can't change that. Your children can't see those people as mom and dad because they're
Hmm.
not to them. And then great grandparents and so on. I mean, it's hard to get further and further beyond that.
Hmm.
But then now that you're a grandparent, now you're seeing a baby in a completely different light,
Totally different light.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate. I've been able to interview a good amount of people. I love interviewing grandparents. Not that it's an exclusive thing, but I always ask them, what's your favorite part? And I asked, his name is Rick Hartman. I said, if you could be one age for the rest of your life, what would it be? And
Oh, that's a great question.
it's a very heavy question,
Yeah.
right? Because he was an airline pilot. He's been flying for like 40 years. So he could describe being 13, learning about planes and his first experience in a plane and that dream, and you could just live in that dream forever.
Mhm.
He could have described being 25 and just
Right.
being this young pilot flying around the world. He said it couldn't be any age before grandchildren.
I
He
could see that.
said now that he's experienced grandkids, he says I could never go back if even if I had a choice because it was that important, that impactful.
I could see that. Sure.
And he had a poetic answer that he hasn't reached that age yet, which is a very beautiful answer, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it really shows that as a parent, which I'm not a parent yet, the stress. My sister has 4,
Oh, yeah. So
and
she knows all
uh,
too well.
I gladly take on the name of Funkle. I'm the fun uncle.
The fun uncle.
I
Yeah.
get to rent them, so I get to play with them,
That's
have
right.
fun,
Yeah.
rough them up, and I just give them back.
So it's kind of almost like a grandparent kind of
Kind of,
little
yeah.
bit. Yeah.
And Rick Hartman, the gentleman I was referring to, he gets a joke that he has seniority. That if he wants to give the grandkid a cookie, he's going to give the grandkid a
Yeah.
cookie,
It
right?
does.
He's got
Yeah.
he's got more seniority over the parents, right?
Very true.
And there's that line of respect and admiration, right?
Sure.
Um, what has being a grandparent taught you?
That's also a very, very good question. Um, to really, to really step back and to like, I just look at him and, it's very emotional. It's very moving. And it's just this beautiful, human being that's just learning his curiosity, how fragile, right? How dependent he is on his mom and his dad. And, I just want obviously the best for him. Um, and then also recognizing that, he's going to experience adversity at some point in his life, right? And um, with good lessons from his parents and, perhaps from myself, and other family members, he'll be prepared for that and he'll persevere and he'll flourish. But it really is just appreciating really the tiny things that we take for granted of a newborn and life, and just seeing him at that stage of just learning all these little things. So, it's kind of like, when someone says, well, step back and, smell the flowers, have an appreciation for. That's kind of what I think, I'm going through right now is to really stepping back and looking at him, and it's allowing me to have some, to be retrospective of my life, my career, my relationships, and to really be very appreciative for everyone that I've had in my life. Um, because now I've seen this, this tiny little human being that's connected to me. And that's just, it's a beautiful thing.
Vulnerability
Mhm.
is what you really described a lot, right? Where children are precious and they're vulnerable. And I was listening, I don't remember where I heard this conversation, but these people were chatting and they kind of described that kids are creative. I think it's kind of a natural thing for kids to be creative. A lot of kids draw or paint or chalk
Right.
or, it's not a stick, it's a wand and we're playing army men outside and all these other things, right? Creativity's I feel like that's a very natural human thing.
Sure.
And I think it's sad that it's almost taught out of too many people where eventually at some point you're 13, you're in middle school, and you're doodling in algebra class, and you're told to stop doing that and pay attention.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then you lose
I
this
know what you're, yeah.
you lose this creativity. Some people are able to hold on to it, And I think it's beautiful when parents are able to prosper that, and grandparents
Mhm.
or uncles or aunts or whoever else, or even just a mentor that I think everyone's creative. I think some people are kind of,
Mhm.
it's a learned experience to not pursue it. But I also think it's a skewed perspective that you're incredibly creative with numbers. And it's not necessarily a gift that I have, but we need people creative with numbers. We need people passionate about accounting
Mhm.
because these are important jobs to be done. But that vulnerability also plays a key role where you're almost taught not to be vulnerable.
Yeah,
Where you have to harden
it's
up
true.
and toughen up.
Yeah.
And conversations like these can be vulnerable.
Mhm.
And I think it's important because it shows that it's a unique human experience. It's another thing AI can't do.
Can't do it.
AI can't be vulnerable. And
Never will be.
it's almost the opposite because it wants to solve every problem to not be
That's
vulnerable.
right.
And it's a huge disconnect that people, you get it or you don't get it. And
Mm.
I hope people get it
Yeah.
because it's an important aspect of life.
Yeah. Creativity, absolutely. I think back to my kids, when they were younger. Um, and, nowadays there's a toy and there's an electronic toy for pretty much any kind of form of entertainment. And, they had those back then. But I could probably confidently say that their most creative and most fun time was when, like, let's say we had like a delivery of some large item and it was a big box, and they just went out on the back deck and they just created like this house out of this box, and they colored it and they draped towels over it, and they were shielding themselves from the sun, and so it was almost like they built their own house, right? As opposed to all these little electronic toys. And I think that's, kind of what you're describing is, that ability to be creative. My younger daughter is, an incredible artist and incredibly creative, and she can sit down and just sketch something out. I couldn't for the life of me ever begin to do anything like that. And so she's, very different from my other daughter, who's a lawyer. So, both creative in their own way. One's a legal mind, but one's, an artist. But yeah, I think just, being able to sit down and just, with a blank sheet of paper and just start to create, is very different than if someone's always handing you something that's already kind of, produced, and it's not allowing the mind to think of different ways of doing things. It's probably maybe why Legos are so, popular, because I think it involves a certain amount of creativity to come up with, construct all these different things, right?
And important. And also, defining creativity is very difficult because pen and paper, pencil, crayon, it's an easy way to describe it.
Mhm.
Obviously, people then think of paint, but there's music, there's visual arts,
Oh, yeah.
sports is a
Sure.
big creativity.
Yeah.
There's a reason that if you watch baseball, not every batter has the same stance.
That's right. Yeah.
Football, Tom Brady doesn't throw the football the exact same way as Patrick Mahomes or someone else.
Mhm.
There is creativity in how they do things.
Mm.
There's creativity in engineering. There's creativity in driving. So defining creativity could be tough.
Mhm.
So I don't want people to think it's just that beautiful visual arts.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. It's a good
this is
point.
a type of creativity. I could film this in a third bedroom or my closet or something else, right? And just have this black room. And I get that there's a time and place. It's
Sure.
extremely convenient. I think it's way cooler and way more fun and
Yeah.
creative that as I'm looking at you, I'm looking at a 911 Porsche behind you. There's a Dodge Demon over there. There's a McLaren Mercedes Benz above it. That's extremely rare. And I get to see all this cool stuff. This is way more creative
Sure. Yeah, it
than
is.
if we just sat in like my back patio or something, right?
Infinitely. Yeah.
Um, so we'll get to the fun part. I had never met you in person till today
Mhm.
before this
Yeah.
conversation. We had one conversation and I knew very little about you. You came highly recommended, but they only alluded to success of the firm and the very heartwarming story of your family, right?
Yeah.
I didn't really know much else. So we're on the phone, and you may not have noticed it casually came up your first car.
Yeah.
Everything changed. And again, that wasn't an in person conversation, and I could tell. You were enthusiastic, you lit up, you're excited, you're
Yeah.
passionate, and you were emotional in a good, positive, happy way.
Mhm.
Your first car is pretty cool. You've had some other cool cars since then.
Yeah.
Tell me the story of your first car.
So I'm in high school, finishing up high school, and getting my license, 17 years old. And like all of my friends, I need to get a car. I want to get a car. Um, but I want a cool car, right? And I'll go back a little bit further in the story. When my mom would, she would need to go to New York from time to time. We live in New Jersey. She need to go to New York to buy inventory for her clothing store. So she would have to make trips into New York City, to deal with suppliers and go buy and get inventory. Well, she didn't want to make that trip by herself. So, here's her young son, the baby. I'm in elementary school, and she would ask me like to go. And of course, I'm a young kid. I don't want to go drive to New York City. But back then, it was interesting because Shell gas stations had a promotion where if you filled up your tank of gas, you would get a free Hot Wheel. So my mom would use that as a enticement. I don't want to say bribe.
Leverage.
Yeah, leverage to well, if you come with me, we'll stop at the Shell station, we'll fill up, and you can get a Hot Wheel. Well, I loved Hot Wheels from the time I was a little boy. So that's probably where, my passion for cars probably started from the time I was just, a youngster. But so again, I wanted a cool car. And so my parents, being wonderful parents and role models, they said, okay, well, we're not just going to buy you a car. You need to have some skin in the game. And so you need to go get a job and you need to go save up some money. And then here's what we will do. Whatever money you save, we'll match it dollar for dollar. So if you save 1,000, if you save 2,000, we'll match that and then you could buy your car. So I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So started working, building above ground pools, various, landscaping, just different, jobs. And I was fortunate enough to accumulate $3,000. Not bad for a high schooler. And my parents matched the 3,000 and I bought a 1979 Pontiac Trans Am, white with a screaming blue eagle on the hood, 6.6 liter, V8. And man, I thought I've arrived. This is like the coolest car. And I loved it. It was an awesome car. I had a lot of fun with it. I did start doing a little bit of drag racing at Englishtown, New Jersey, just for some fun. So I think that kind of started maybe a little bit subconsciously the passion for auto sports. And so I had that car for a while. I ended up selling it, and of course, then going off to college and all of that starts to change, your trajectory and your responsibilities. And so eventually, I uh, just started buying responsible cars, not sports cars, and then eventually getting married and having kids. It's SUVs, it's sedans, it's so forth. And then 2005, is when I'm 43 years old. And I saw a Nissan 350Z advertisement and I thought, wow, that is a really cool looking car. And it kind of sat with me for a bit, right? Um, and I thought, like, my kids are a little bit older. I've saved up some money, and this would not be an irresponsible purchase at this point, right? I mean, the 350Z was a pretty reasonable
It's a
price car.
realistic
Yeah,
car.
it's realistic. It wasn't a Porsche 911, as much as I would like to have that at that time. Um, so long story short, I went and bought a Nissan 350Z, and my nephews, when they saw that, oh yeah, Uncle Ron bought a little sports car, a 350Z, and they asked me like, oh, have you been on the car forums? I'm like, what is that? I don't know what you're talking about. They said, oh, you got to go on the forums so that you can see about things about your car and modifying your car and doing different things. Well, that really lit the flame because once I got involved in the forums and I saw what people were doing with these cars, how they were modifying them, and how they were doing car shows and different track events and so forth. Um, uh, I was really fascinated, And so now it's like, oh, now I think I can make this car look a little bit better, and I think I can make it be faster. And so there was a local group of Orlando enthusiasts that had a regular car meet. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to go out to, I think I posted on the forum, and they said, yeah, you're more than welcome to come out. Here's where we're going to meet this particular day and time. So I went, and sure enough, there was probably like a dozen other, Nissan 350Z enthusiasts. And, again, I met some really interesting people. But I met, one of my, what today is one of my best friends, Matt, and who was, one of the co-owners of this facility. And we became really, really good friends, and we had kind of that same passion for, for cars, and that started growing. And then we met, some other folks and some other people in the hobby, and that's really where it kind of reignited the flame of my passion for, for cars and for auto sports.
I don't know if I ever thanked my dad. I know he watches these episodes. I'm grateful I didn't have a cool car as my first. I didn't have a car in high school. So my parents, my dad's awesome, very modest. He always let my mom get the new car, and then he would drive that one to get rid of the oldest one. Uh, so when I was in high school, my mom got a newer car, and my dad's like, I'll just drive what we had before. So
Mhm.
my dad inherited the 2001 Chrysler Voyager with, with the
Not the best option, but yeah,
it's all
yeah,
right. It was pretty
yeah,
blue,
yeah.
with the bench seat in the middle. And
Mhm.
so in high school, if I drove places, it was probably in the 2001 Chrysler Voyager. And the thing eventually fell apart, but it got me where I needed to go. But I'm grateful that I didn't have a cool car because I probably would have pushed the boundary with very little experience driving.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm grateful. So when the time came, I got a pickup truck,
Mhm.
and that was pretty grounded. You can't go too crazy with a pickup truck. Um, but Pontiac Trans Am is a super cool car.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Um, Again, I know who Burt Reynolds is.
He made it
Uh,
famous.
he made it
He
famous.
did.
I love when he gets made fun of on Saturday Night Live when they're playing SNL. Um, but that car is super iconic, and
It
most
is.
people think of it as black with the gold
That's right.
screaming
Yeah.
eagle.
Mine was totally different.
Yours is totally different.
Totally
Yours is
different.
white
Yeah.
with the blue eagle,
Yeah.
right? And I think did it still have some gold accents? I think
It
maybe,
did. Yeah.
right?
A little
Yep.
bit of gold and
Yeah.
silver accents. And I think the interior was, I think, like a powder blue color or
Yep.
something like
Yeah. Yeah.
that.
Super neat.
Had an 8-track tape player,
That's
so
awesome.
yeah.
Very cool.
And then I started modifying it
So
right away.
what'd you do to the Trans Am?
I put a new shifter in it. I put a shift kit in it. It had, yeah, I know it sounds cheesy right now, but it had chrome side pipes at the time. But I mean, back then it was a cool car,
Yeah, it still is a cool car.
and yeah, I probably wish I would have kept it, because now it's popular with kind of the vintage, enthusiasts. And it would have been cool to at least to keep your very first car. Um, but life and responsibility, you got to sell it to get the money and move on to other things. But yeah, it was a fun foray into, okay, now I got a cool car and modifying it. And but then it quickly changed to where priorities in life and responsibilities, you realize, okay, I need to set this aside. This is not
Practical.
it's not practical anymore.
Hard to fit
Right.
people in a
Yeah.
Trans Am,
Yeah.
right? Passengers.
But later on with the 350Z, now I'm in my 40s, and now it changed. And then meeting other fellow enthusiasts, that's changed as well. And I could tell you, I've got, you know, lifelong, incredibly good friends that I've met through the community. There's a few of us in particular, Matt, Alex, of course, a P1, Lyndon, another great friend. I mean, I quite frankly, I trust my life with these guys. I literally do, because they're preparing this car, for track use. And I mean, it's not a street legal car, obviously, as you can tell. And so when I'm out on the track, it's a very, very high risk endeavor. And if things, are not prepared, if there's mistakes that are made, the consequences can be severe. but I do. I trust them, implicitly, and I know they're always going to, do what's best to keep me safe. And they're all like brothers to me. My two older brothers were much older than me. One's 10 years older, the other one was 15 years older. And so I didn't get to experience really kind of the true brotherhood that I guess brothers that are closer in age experience. So I feel like these guys are more that way, although I'm the oldest, so I could probably, try to give them good advice from time to time, as the older guy in the group. But they're great, again, uh, we share that passion for auto sports, for racing. And that's really when it started was in 2009. Because after the 350Z, Matt and I started, modifying them, and we took it up to a certain point, and then we realized that we probably, maxed out the capabilities of that car. Uh, Matt progressed into a Dodge Viper, which was quite a leap. But he's an incredible driver, and he certainly handled that car extremely well. Um, I had a couple other, I went more kind of the exotic route, and I did have a Porsche briefly for a period of time.
What was it? What'd you have?
It was a Porsche 911 Turbo.
Awesome.
So
Nice.
it was all black, it was beautiful. And I really enjoyed that car. I mean, I think a Porsche is, it's a tremendous all around, car. You can take it to the track, you can, drive it to work, you can drive it, on the street. It's very, very versatile machine for sure. So I had a couple more on the exotic side, a couple of Lamborghinis, and which are great. But oddly enough, they do garnish a lot of attention. Not all of it the best. But I did the first one. I did track pretty. That's really where I learned how to race was with that car. It's not usually the way that people, get into auto racing is, starting off with the Lambo. Um, but I learned and had some good instruction along the way, and we challenge each other. We're like brothers, so we're all very competitive, and and then eventually I got a Viper. So I saw a Viper being delivered to a dealership out in Texas. And through social media now, I saw this beautiful purple Viper being unloaded from a trailer. And Matt was actually coming to the office that day. And I told him, like, man, this purple Viper is just phenomenal. Well, long story short, I ended up trading in the Lambo, got the Viper, and that was in 2016. So I had the Viper for, over 9 years. It was a tremendous car. Learned a lot, and it really made me a much, much better driver. Um, Racing on the track is not for everyone. Again, it can be it is very dangerous. But you can learn a lot. Learning a lot about car control, learning a lot about track awareness. I think it just makes anyone that does it, a much better driver. And it's really the best place. It's the best environment where you can experience the capabilities of a car like that in the most safest manner possible. It's not out in the streets racing. That's not. It's nothing I ever wanted to do. It's nothing I ever did, and I have no interest in doing that. I think it's great if we give youngsters an opportunity to be able to go out on a track and learn. I think it will prevent a lot of people from doing acting stupidly, irresponsibly with cars out on the street. Um, so yeah, that Viper was great. Taught me a lot about driving, and started doing it competitively, and had some good success. Running time trials with other Vipers, and again met some great friends. One of our great friends is guy Brandon out of Mississippi, also a phenomenal driver. We all have this camaraderie, the shared interest, which is wonderful. And eventually, I ended up with this thing here.
So explain what this is.
Yeah, so this is a Le Mans prototype car, race car. So it's made by a company out of France. Ligier is the name of the manufacturer. It actually has a Nissan motor in it. It's a V8 motor from a Nissan. But it's just it's an incredible, piece of machinery, tremendous amount of downforce. Um, it's really next level. I mean, like going from the Viper into this, I could honestly say I never truly felt like I was a race car driver. Not that I would call myself that, but when I got into um, the first Le Mans prototype, that a good friend and a very generous gentleman, Tom, we were out at Daytona. He gave me the opportunity to drive his, because he saw, I was driving the Viper and he felt confident that, I wasn't gonna do anything stupid. And so he allowed me to drive his, because I was really, really curious about the car. Because I did start to get a little bit more concerned about safety. So, I mean, the Viper is a street car. It's not a, factory made race car. So it doesn't have a full roll cage. And I was taking it up to some pretty significant speeds, top speed on Daytona. It would be over 180 miles per hour at the track at Daytona. And so in the back of your mind, if something goes wrong, that can be, a big issue. And so I was growing a little bit more and more concerned about safety. And I really wanted to just have, a true race car with a full blown cage, and all the safety that goes along with, a race car. Tom did give me the opportunity to drive his. He got to his through the same kind of thought process. He was get concerned about safety, and I drove that thing for 30 minutes. And when I came off the track, I probably had the biggest grin on my face, and I told the guys I've got to have one. And so, within about 30 to 60 days, started looking around, and we found one, out in California. And here it is today, a different color. So it was start off at silver, but purple, had to kind of keep the legacy of I gave the purple car, the purple people eater. Um, and So we wanted to continue the purple. And so we wrapped it in this beautiful purple color. And I've been enjoying it tremendously since I've had it. It's now going on almost 2 years of having it. I've learned a lot, and but now I'm driving it and doing it competitively. So now I just recently finished a first set of sprint races in this car. I was doing time trials with it before, but now did sprint racing. So that's wheel to wheel racing with a good group, So we just finished the races out in Sebring, and I finished second place in the second and third race, and finished fourth in the first race. And again, learning a lot, and it's an incredible experience to be out on the track in this thing. It really, I know for a lot of people, they ask me like, "Wow, like why do you do that?" And I said, It's therapeutic. It really is. It allows me. You cannot be thinking of really anything else other than what you're doing on the track at any time. So everything else that's going on in your life is taking a backseat, right? Obviously, that all changes when you're done. Um, but it is that ability to just kind of really be so hyper focused on something. And it fuels that passion, it fuels that competitive nature that I guess I've always had. And so, yeah, that's how this came to be.
Well, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
You're incredibly modest,
Sure.
and
Thanks.
it's it's a trait everyone should have or have more of. And you so eloquently, nonchalantly note you went from a Z to a Lamborghini. Was it a Lamborghini and then a Porsche, Porsche then a Lamborghini?
Yeah, portion of it.
So these cars are very, very unique. Few people get the experience to drive them and
Right.
own them. So each car is radically different.
Mhm.
So your Nissan Z obviously had 350 or
Yeah.
3.5 liter
Right.
V6, right?
V6. Right.
The Lamborghini had V10,
V10.
V10
That's right.
probably turboed,
No, no
not
turbo.
turbo,
Not
naturally
turbo.
aspirated.
Naturally
Awesome.
aspirated.
Which Lamborghini? I don't know which Lamborghini you had.
It was called the Gallardo Superleggera. So it
Awesome.
was the Gallardo, but it was the track version of that car. So again, I wanted to get more into tracking the car. We did, I mean, Matt and I and several other friends, we did a lot of car shows initially with the 350Zs, but we discovered pretty quickly that car shows was not, our thing, that we really wanted to, to drive them hard. That was where the fun was going to come from. And our friend Lyndon went to a track event up in Savannah, Georgia at Roebling Road Raceway, and he had an awesome time. And so right away that piqued our interest. And the next thing you know, we're signing up for, the next track event. And Matt's in his Viper and I'm in a, Lamborghini. And I'm sure the track instructors were like, oh my gosh, we got a brand new guy in a Viper and a brand new guy in a Lambo. This is not going to go well.
You get attention.
Yeah, you get attention. But I think we were responsible. We didn't do anything stupid.
Yeah.
We know.
It's an evolution,
Yeah,
especially among cars. I got a couple directions to go. Did you ever go to a racing school?
I never did.
No.
I did have a couple coaches. One coach in particular, his name's Jonathan. He was actually he was a winning driver at the 12 hour of Sebring for BMW. So phenomenal driver, just natural talent, incredible, and just an awesome guy. He's still a great friend to this day. And so he gave me some really, really good coaching early on. He taught me, how to kind of combat what's known as the red mist. Right when you're out on the track, and my buddies are out there, you get very competitive, and then you start to make mistakes. Right, that's what's known as the red mist. You get too aggressive. So he used to always tease me about having the red mist. But so yeah, I never went to a professional racing school. But I did have some professional instruction. Yeah.
I was curious because I didn't know. I know Porsche has a race school. It's
Right.
like it's a school, but it's really quick. It's not like this like massive long thing. I think it's a 1 or 2 day event in Georgia. So I wasn't sure if you had instruction like that.
Yeah, I never did. Probably would have been a good idea to do that. I'd never, pursued that route. It is very valuable for people that are getting into the hobby to go through a school like that because again, it's going to teach them car control, track awareness, braking, acceleration, all of those kinds of things, all the dynamics of driving a car. Porsche does have a very good. So there are a lot of different groups that sponsor track events. Porsche Club is fantastic at that. There's a few others. And so that was the route where, I signed up for an event, and you would have an instructor in the car with you and they would see how you're progressing and they would help you. And then of course, over time, if you're good enough, then they would promote you to the next group. So you start off with novice, and maybe there's intermediate and then there's an advanced and then there's like a race group. And so really it's been a journey over a lot of years since 2009 until now to get to a point where you have a race license and you're actually racing wheel to wheel in a professional race car. It's yeah, it's pretty cool.
Extremely cool. Extremely cool. So just to catch up from the 350Z to a Le Mans car, right? What so you Lamborghini is an incredible machine.
Certainly.
How did you reach the point where like, all right, it's time to go from this to the next vehicle?
Yeah, with the Lambo, again, it was a great car. The first one was amazing. The sound of it was incredible. It's almost like a Formula One car, very high, incredible exhaust sound. I had taken it as far as I could. Back then, Lamborghini at the local factory, dealership level, was not really super supportive of guys that were, tracking their Lambos. And then the cost, becomes very, clear that it's just cost prohibitive to track a car like that unless you've got extremely deep pockets. And while it was cool to have the car, I didn't really drive it on the street much. And even when I did, again, it attracts attention that, You may think at first that you'll enjoy it, but, I didn't like it. Um, again, for me, it was more like I was buying it because it's a performance car. I mean, it was a Lambo, so it was pretty cool. I mean, I can't say it wasn't. Um, and then so I had that car from 2009 to about 2014. So let's say 5 years. And then I felt like I needed more power. I needed, a little bit more performance. And so I upgraded to a newer model. That car was lime green. Definitely caught a lot of
That's a
attention.
Lamborghini. What
Yeah,
model was that?
it was the
Aventador?
same Gallardo
Okay.
Superleggera, but
Okay.
it was just a newer platform,
Gotcha.
slightly more horsepower, kind of different look to it. Gorgeous car. But from the very first time that I started tracking that car, we had a lot of overheating issues just constantly. We are trying to figure out, how to fix these overheating issues. And ultimately, I started getting really frustrated with that. I was, trying to work with a company out of Australia and coming up with these custom parts, cooling parts and so forth. Never really got a good solution. Meanwhile, Alex, Matt, they've got Vipers. They're tracking Vipers. They know Vipers inside and out. There's obviously, they're Viper specialists, and um, I see this Viper, being rolled off the trailer, and like, well, that's what I got to do. I mean, they know Vipers. They know how to drive Vipers. Let me get a Viper. Now, going from an all-wheel drive, paddle shift, mid-engine, Italian, exotic, to an American-made V10 high torque manual transmission car,
Front engine
front engine,
changes everything.
was terrifying at first. Because I mean, you always hear about the stories of people wrecking Vipers, right? Um, but from the time I got in the car, I mean, we took delivery, we immediately started tracking it. And again, I learned a ton. Um, just the kind of visceral experience of being in the car and having manual transmission, and having this torque monster and really being careful, right? I mean, you can be stupid and do stupid things and have really bad consequences driving a Viper. But again, it was teaching me car control, modulating throttle, those kinds of things. And just over time, I just got progressively better and a little bit faster and better and a little bit faster. And that car was just amazing. We modified it, we added more horsepower to it. So I think it was pushing probably over 750 horsepower.
Was it naturally
It
aspirated?
was naturally
Yeah.
aspirated, yeah, but, we put in new cams, new heads, um, you know, uh, everything that we did it based on how was it going to be optimal for
Performance.
performance on the track for road racing,
Yeah.
right? Not for drag racing, not for quarter mile, not for half mile. It needed to be able to withstand being out on the track for 30 minutes of, aggressive driving. Cooling is very, very important. Dependability was very important. So we learned things along the way, but it's an incredible platform. It's an incredible car. The culture, the people involved in Vipers it's a wonderful community. It really is. Again, I've met great, great friends, really, really good people. And so again, back to it became more of a safety thing. And like, okay, I think I've reached a point where I really need to just have a true factory built track car, not a street car.
So I love cars. I know we chatted that one
We
time
chatted,
before.
yeah.
I love cars. And when you said this is what you had, I don't know everything. I really
Yeah.
don't. I don't race or anything. I was shocked. I was like I don't
What
know
is
if I
that?
know
Yeah.
what that is
Most
because
people don't.
you know
Yeah.
Vipers, Lamborghinis,
Yeah.
Porsches. I'm like okay, I could.
Street car, you can
Yeah,
relate.
I've
Yeah.
I've I've got decent base knowledge
Mhm.
of your Lamborghini had a V10 and so on and so forth. These are awesome. And like I said, I love cars. So for the layman person that has no idea, this is a carbon fiber monocoque
Correct.
and it has I'm glazing over that. So for the people listening, you could explain better than I can. It's a one piece tub of carbon fiber,
Right.
making the car extremely rigid
Yeah.
and extremely light,
Extremely protected.
extremely protected.
I think of it like a very, very protected cocoon
Yeah.
that's wrapped around me. I never wanted to go into an open cockpit car. I always wanted a closed cockpit car with a full roll cage.
And 6-point harness,
Yes,
right?
and that's what this has. So this has not only the carbon fiber monocoque, but it's obviously got a full steel roll cage in it as well. The car is super light. So to give you a perspective, the Viper was 3,400 pounds. This is 2,000 pounds, slightly.
It's less than, was it 1,000 kilos or 2,000?
Yeah, I think it's a
1,000
thousand.
kilos,
Right.
just under 1,000 kilos, which
Yeah.
is
No, I think it's 984 to be exact, something like that. Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
So explain again, hopefully everyone can see it in the cameras, but explain what canards are. You have magnesium wheels, I
Mhm.
believe. I don't know, are these the factory wheels? Did you swap them out?
Yeah, they're made by a company named OZ Racing, so they're famous for their racing wheels. They are magnesium, so everything is about lightweight. So the beauty about this is that the actual operating costs of this are probably commensurate or even slightly less than the Viper. Because it's such a light car, you're not going through brake pads as often, you're not going through brake rotors as much. The fuel that we need to run, is 100 octane fuel, so you just can't get that at any pump. But really, outside of that, the operating costs are not as bad as I would say a Viper, which you go through tires quicker. I don't go through tires as much with this car, and we're buying, um, these scrubs that the professional teams use just for a short period of time. So we're able to buy them, slightly used, but they're still very, very good tires that will last, several, days. Um, so it's yeah, it's all about weight reduction and downforce. It's all about grip, maximum amount of grip. So the biggest adjustment for me has been going from a car that weighs 3,400 pounds that was on very aggressive street tires. I would say they're R compound tires. They're not slicks like this, where I could go out on the track and I could probably second or third lap already be, full on. You cannot do this with this car. That will get you in trouble. And because you have to get heat in the tire, you have to get heat in the brakes. And because it's so much lighter, the only way to do that is to go faster for the downforce to, to
Do
have
its
the
job.
effect, do its job. And so that's where you have to be careful. And so that's really been the biggest transition for me. But it's literally like you're sitting in a go kart. The environment in there is very tight. Um, and again, back to when I, went out on Daytona when the gentleman Tom let me drive his. At that moment when I was going around the track at Daytona, and this is on, right after the Rolex 24 races just happened, because I'm running that same course in that car. It wasn't a competitive track event; it was a regular, high performance driving event. But I would say that I mean, I felt like a race car driver at that point. I mean, just the paddle shift, the sound, just the environment that you're in, how low you're sitting. It was just an incredible experience. And so I was again instantly hooked. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And so yeah, it's extremely different from a street car. So it's a V8 from Nissan. It's a 5-liter V8. Um, and, we've modified the ECU. So we've added a little bit of horsepower to it.
This
Um,
one's natural aspirated too?
it's naturally
I know I keep
aspirated.
asking you
Yeah.
that, but that changes torque, that changes everything, how the
It
car can
can, yeah,
react, right?
it's pretty torquey car.
Yeah.
And it's got a 6-speed X-Track transmission. So it's sequential. You have to engage the clutch to get into first gear. And then after that, you're just shifting with the paddles. Incredible performance. I mean, it's just the experience is just really it's hard to describe,
It's
really.
elite.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
It's really cool. And again, I love cars, so I'm aware of Brembo brakes, carbon ceramic
Mhm.
brakes, everything else. So magnesium wheels are extremely light and extremely durable
Right.
because rotating mass is going to affect how the car is going to handle and
That's right.
everything else.
Yeah.
Um, I'm looking at the rotors right now. So you have drilled. Are they carbon ceramic brakes? I'm sure with
They're slotted
are
rotors.
slotted. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
they're not carbon.
They're not carbon.
Yeah,
Okay.
steel because carbon's very, very expensive. So you run steel
Okay.
brakes. They're more. You can get heat in them quicker.
Okay.
So we run, yeah, steel brakes. Again, it's all about downforce. So I forget what kind of level of downforce this car has at 150 miles per hour. It's the Viper also had a lot of downforce, but this is really kind of next level to kind of give you an idea of, I'm running about 5 6 seconds a lap faster in this car at Sebring than I was the Viper, and the Viper had 750 horsepower.
How much horsepower does it have? I don't know.
This has got about 470 now. Yeah.
So people are going to be listening. People are going to be listening. Like, oh, that Dodge Demon has blah blah blah. It's not just horsepower and torque. It's not because if the car is that light, it's like a go kart.
Yeah. It's power to weight.
It's power to weight,
Power to
and
weight ratio.
this thing punches.
Yeah.
And did you physically modify any of the external except for the color, the wrap?
No.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So explain how the spoiler works
Mhm.
and like canards. Like
Yeah.
people don't see these on everyday street cars, so they're not going to realize that's a canard. That's blah
Yeah.
blah blah. Right.
Canards are like these little fins that are in the front fenders. Again, that's to help, provide downforce at the front of the car. Um, and the wing does the same at the back because you also want to have a balance. If you have a disproportionate amount of downforce in the front and not in the back, then the car will be very tail happy, right? So it's having a proper balance, and that can change from track to track. So if we're out at the track at Daytona, that's going to be a very different setup than, let's say, Road Atlanta or Sebring, right? Because Daytona is just it's probably the fastest track in the country, where you're going almost at top speed, full open throttle for almost the entire lap. So it's a different setup. You can adjust it. The rear diffuser, again, same thing. It's a lot of it is about airflow. So you can almost see through the entire car, from different vantage points. You can see straight through, kind of like the Aston Martin Valkyrie, which
Hmm.
is very famous. So this is kind of similar to that. It's just this protected little cocoon, and then, to the back of it, you've got a motor and a transmission that are attached to it, and everything else is attached to that. So it's really incredible feat of engineering. It's been a way for a lot of younger drivers and people that are getting into professional racing. It's a way for them to progress, in racing. So the LMP3 is part of the IMSA series. It used to be part of the main IMSA series. Now it's part of the VP Challenge series. But it's where, kind of up and coming drivers, can run in the LMP3, series. And if they, do very well and they progress, then they can move up into, either the
LMP2.
GT class or the LMP2. So, and the IMSIS class, there's, the hypercars, the GTP cars, and there's the LMP2s, and then other prototypes. So this would be another prototype, but it's not running in the main series anymore. And then you've got your GT cars. The GT cars are the ones that we can relate to because they're street cars.
Hmm.
So that's really the big difference. You can see that it's an Aston Martin or it's a BMW or it's a Porsche or it's a Ferrari. Yeah,
Yeah,
right. These are a little bit different.
these are cool. These are extremely cool, and I know I light up. I've been staring at it for hours before we even started. So,
Thanks.
um, you've gone to numerous tracks. I think we're extremely fortunate in Florida.
Very much so.
You're more fortunate than me because I'm on the West Coast. You're more closer to the East Coast,
Mhm.
where you're right between Sebring and Daytona,
Yeah, right. Almost in the middle.
right in the middle.
Two of the best tracks in the entire country.
There's more people in Europe that know Sebring, Florida, than Americans
Yeah,
are aware of
probably true. Yeah.
Sebring, Florida. Is there a track in the world that you would dream to take this to?
Oh boy. People always ask me about if I want to go on the Nürburgring. I don't want to go on the Nürburgring. Um, Probably Spa, I think is probably one of the, tracks that, at least from the flow of it, is one that I think I would, enjoy. I've been to a lot of phenomenal tracks here in the United States. So Road America is probably my favorite track outside of Sebring. Sebring's my home track. But I've been to, obviously Daytona, Sebring, Road America, Watkins Glen, VIR, Road Atlanta.
Laguna Seca.
Haven't been to Laguna Seca, have gone that far west. Maybe that would be in the cards one day. I have gone as far as Circuit of the Americas, COTA, which is in Austin, Texas. Also a phenomenal track. So yeah, I've gone to quite a few of them, and then there's one in Nebraska, one in Pittsburgh. So I've raced a fair amount of tracks in the country.
Very cool. I've got only a couple questions left.
Sure.
This car is not street legal. You can't just slap a license plate on it, right?
No.
Or a dealer tag and act like you're doing a test drive.
Yeah.
So you have to trailer it.
Right.
To do this in the safest way possible, how many people should it take to operate this car, take it to the track, and do your thing?
Well, my friend Tom, actually, he does a lot of that. He has one himself, and he does a lot of it himself.
One person?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So he's got his set up in a way where he has figured out a way where he can load it on the trailer and do all those things himself. Not what I want to do. Now, kudos to him for being able to do that. Realistically, I think it really requires, I'd say 2 to 3 people.
Yeah.
So, because, just being able, you've got to take off the nose. Sometimes you got to take off, the rear engine, the cover. Even those are 2-person jobs. You can't,
You don't want to drop it.
one person alone cannot do it. So,
No, it's too big.
even Tom needs some help doing some of those things
Yeah.
as well. So,
Very neat.
yeah, 2 to 3 people. So, when I go and I track, it's usually, about 4 of us, so it's Alex, Lyndon, it's Matt, and, and Matt actually, he drives competitively too, awesome driver, and my friend Brandon as well. And he's got a Viper. Matt's got a factory race car Viper, an ACRX. So yeah, we're out there, we're having fun, we're enjoying our time together. I like to tell people, like, the 30 minutes that we're out on the track, it's, to give us time, to talk about all of the wonderful experiences, the rest of the time that we're there. So even though there's a lot of downtime, it's a lot of camaraderie, and it's some great friendships. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What are your goals for this car?
It's again, continue to compete, at the amateur level. I'm not a pro by any stretch of the imagination. I've got other, responsibilities as well, to pay the bills. So, is to continue racing it now in NASA is, National Auto Sports Association. They run some good spec races. So I want to continue to do that. HSR is another group that's well respected. Seems to be a really good, group of folks, historic sports car racing, HSR. So they run a series specifically for prototypes. So those would be probably the 2 main, track environments that I'll continue to run this car in. So I do enjoy the racing. I do enjoy the wheel-to-wheel racing. So I'm going to continue to do that and keep enjoying it while, I can,
Yeah.
mentally, physically. So it is a physically demanding car, to say the least. 35 minutes sprint race in this car is quite demanding,
Hot.
which gives me a massive appreciation for these professional race car drivers that are in there for several hours. I used to do endurance racing with the guys, back years ago in Champ Car racing. So we all shared ownership in a car, and we ran it in that series. And we would do, 12-hour race, 24-hour race. And so we would be in the car anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours
A piece.
a piece.
Mhm.
And then, come in, hand it off to the next guy. Really good, taught us, a lot about teamwork. But there's no way I can do, I don't want to do an endurance race in this car. So sprint racing is
Where it's at.
just good for me. Yeah.
Very, very neat. I'm sure I'll find out if you outgrow it, if it becomes a LMP2 or beyond.
Yeah.
I guess 2 questions left. Is there a dream car you'd hope to have in the future?
Streetcar, not particularly.
No.
Yeah, I've got a great street car. It's all electric. I think people would be probably surprised to hear that. It's a great performance car. It's great balance. Um, I've been around cars, for a long time now, and I've seen, the hypercars, the multi-million dollar cars, and um, they're incredible pieces of machinery. I have a tremendous amount of appreciation for them, but that requires a whole level of commitment that is just not anything that I'm suited to do. Really, this is what drives my passion. This is what fuels my passion is, being able to hop in a car and drive it and race it on a track. I mean, what more could I ask for than to be driving this thing on the track?
A lot of people
Right.
ask for
So,
this, so
yeah.
you're definitely in
So,
the right
so
spot.
street car, nothing in particular.
Yeah,
Anything more than this, I don't know. I'm pretty satisfied with where I'm at right now.
it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, last couple things. We already chatted about it. I write all my notes in field notes. They're made in the U.S. and we've talked about them the
Mhm.
entire conversation. But it's really important for me to write my notes. It's textile. There's no battery. Not going to die. It's reliable,
Yeah.
and it's unique to read your own handwriting. Um, it's like a fingerprint. You know what I
Sure.
mean? You
Yeah.
see your handwriting out of anyone else's, you know it's
Mhm.
yours, or your parents and stuff like that, right? So I didn't tell you beforehand. I give every guest field notes. I have one purple field note,
Nice. Perfect. It's
and
al it's almost the right color
I'm
too.
like, this
It's
is the one.
almost
It's
perfect.
very close. So they team up with some companies. This one they teamed up with East Fork. I'm pretty sure they're a pottery company. It's the only purple field notes I have,
That's amazing.
and I'm glad I was saving it. This
I love
one
it.
they've got some other stuff on the back, but I
It's
was like
great.
that one.
Oh, man, that's fantastic.
That
We
one,
have we have to keep a logbook now for this car of everything that's done to it, so
awesome.
this will be
Uh,
this will be a helpful addition.
so yeah, I don't know
Thank you very
why
much.
I hadn't
Yeah,
given a purple field note to anyone else. You're the only
it's
one,
fantastic.
and I don't have any more.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's really thoughtful. I like it.
So, of course. So, I have a really big thank you. I'm looking at both cameras. To Alex and Matt, your great friends, P1 Garage, for letting us host. Um, I'm really appreciative. This is definitely my first interview hosting. I counted before. A lot of cool cars behind us.
To
So,
say the least, yeah.
uh, I'm really grateful. I really am.
Yeah, our
And
pleasure.
I
Yeah.
want to thank Alex and Matt and you as well for the time.
No.
The final question, we've
Mhm.
chatted a little bit before. I describe it each episode. My dad's best advice to me is to never waste a mistake. And I know I always say it. He specifically says never waste a mistake
Mhm.
because it's not just your mistake, because you want to learn from other people.
Right.
So it's any mistake. So everyone listening can learn from you, the experiences of your family, the experiences of what happens when communism
Yeah.
takes over a nation, right?
Right.
These are lessons that we cannot forget and we have to keep learning from them. So the final question for every guest is what is one mistake that you have not wasted?
Oh, that's an awesome question. And I'm sure it probably challenges most people when you ask that. If I had to think about it right now, immediately, my first thought is it takes me immediately back to my second year of college, of opening up that envelope and seeing that I was put on academic probation, and really feeling like a failure at that time. Um, and that was a pivotal moment in my life that I felt like I had to straighten things out. I had to get serious about who I was going to be as a person, what I was going to do. And my brother was phenomenal in helping me, realize that you're wasting time. I don't regret going through that because, again, as I've said before, experiencing that adversity of, being put on, academic probation, you realize that, my options are limited now. um, but I need to recover. And so I'm glad I went through it because I think it made me stronger, over the years. But eternally grateful to my brother for giving me that good advice. But that is definitely a mistake that I don't feel I wasted. The mistake of just wasting time and goofing around at school. That's the one thing that is the most precious resource that we all have is time, right? And you can't ever get it back. Um, so, um, I can't get those 2 years back, but it taught me a good hard lesson. It was a mistake I made in my life. Um, Maybe I can say it helped me get to this point in life.
I
So
think it did.
I'm hopeful.
Beautiful. Ron,
Tom,
you're the man.
thank you very
Thank you so
much.
much for
I
your time.
really appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.